Psychology says that people who go through long periods without friends are often the ones who think the deepest, feel the most, and notice the things others overlook. They aren't broken, antisocial, or failed socially. Their mind simply runs on a different frequency, one that makes normal social life feel shallow, tiring, or unnecessary. Most people assume loneliness is a weakness, but the truth is, some minds outgrow the noise of the world before they ever find a place in it. Because the first thing about people who walk alone is this: you have zero tolerance for fake connections. Not the polite kind, not the performative kind, not the kind where people pretend to care, pretend to listen, or pretend to be someone they're not. Your mind instantly catches the micro expressions, the tone shifts, the passive-aggressive comments, the hidden motives. You see what people don't say as clearly as what they do. And when your intuition is that sharp, small talk feels like static, forced smiles feel heavy, fake friendships feel loud, so you'd rather sit alone in silence than sit in a room full of noise. Not because you hate people, but because you value authenticity more than most people value belonging. And that leads to the second unspoken truth. You crave depth, not company. You want conversations that mean something. Not the weather, not how's work, not recycled lines people throw around without thinking. Your mind wants substance, ideas, psychology, what drives people, how the world actually works beneath its surface. If a conversation doesn't feed your mind or touch your soul, you disconnect. It's not intentional. It's how your brain protects your energy. And that energy is limited because your nervous system feels things more intensely than others. Psychology calls it high social sensitivity. It means you process everything: emotions, body language, tone, unspoken tension, all at once. And even a simple conversation can feel like absorbing someone else's emotional weather. While other people get energized from socializing, your mind works overtime. You analyze, you interpret, you observe, you replay moments after they happen, you think deeper than you talk. That's why you need longer breaks, longer silence, longer moments to breathe. It's not avoidance, it's recovery. And that recovery makes you highly independent. You don't need background noise to feel alive. You don't need validation to feel secure. You don't need a group to feel complete. Your inner world is loud enough, rich enough, interesting enough. This independence confuses people. They think you're distant, cold, detached. But the truth is, you've simply built a life where your peace matters more than your popularity. And deeper than all of that lies another truth. Your past shaped the way you trust today. Maybe you learned early that not everyone who smiles is a friend, that not everyone who listens hears you, that not everyone who shows up stays. So now, you watch before you open up. You test people quietly. You observe what they do when you say no or when you don't give them what they want. Your trust isn't gone, just guarded. Psychology calls this a higher trust threshold. You don't lock people out. You simply don't let them in unless they earn it. And here's what this all means. If you have few friends, or none at all, it's not a flaw. It's not a failure. It's not a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that your mind works differently, with more depth, more intuition, more awareness, more emotional intelligence than most people ever develop. You're not hard to love. You just refuse to accept the kind of love that feels empty. You're not hard to understand. You just don't explain yourself to everyone. And you're not alone because you can't find people. You're alone because you refuse to settle for the wrong ones. Some people walk with crowds their whole lives and never feel understood. Others walk alone for a while until they meet someone who sees them the way they've always seen the world. Clearly, honestly, deeply. The truth is, people like you aren't meant to blend in. You're meant to connect slowly, selectively, intentionally. Because the rarest minds don't need a crowd. They need a mirror. They need someone whose presence feels like peace, not pressure. Until then, walking alone isn't loneliness. It's alignment. People who grew up without many friends often develop something rare, a kind of inner stability that doesn't depend on the noise of the world. And psychology says that when you spend enough time alone, your mind sharpens in ways most people never experience. You start noticing things others overlook: the tone in someone's voice, the shift in their eyes, the subtle tension behind their words. You read people like open books, not because you want to, but because you had years of watching from the quiet corners of life. And that leads to something most never talk about. You don't chase connections. You evaluate them. You don't rush into friendships because you finally understand the cost of letting the wrong people in. You know how one careless person can drain your energy, shape your habits, or break your sense of peace. So now you guard your inner world like it's something sacred, because it is. Psychology calls this protective filtering. You're not avoiding people, you're filtering for intention, alignment, and honesty. But there's something deeper too. You don't fear being alone. You fear being surrounded by the wrong people. Most people fill their lives with noise so they don't have to sit with their thoughts. But you've learned to live in that silence. You've learned to listen to the voice inside you, your intuition, your clarity, your warning signs. And once you experience that level of inner peace, you stop trading it for cheap company. And whether you realize it or not, this shapes your personality in powerful ways. You think before you speak. You observe before you participate. You understand before you judge. Psychologists say individuals like you develop internal referencing, which means you don't check the outside world to know who you are. You check inward. While others ask, do they like me? You ask, do they align with me? While others want to be included, you want to be understood. And while others search for belonging, you search for meaning. But perhaps the most unspoken truth is this. You didn't become this way by accident. Life pushed you into independence before you ever asked for it. Maybe you were the quiet child who grew up with too much on your mind. Maybe you were the teenager who realized friends come and go. Maybe you learned early that people aren't always what they pretend to be. Whatever shaped you, it didn't harden you, it refined you. It made you someone who values honesty, depth, and emotional safety over everything else. Someone who can sit alone for hours without feeling lonely. Someone who would rather have one real conversation than 1,000 empty ones. And when people finally get close enough to see the real you, they're surprised. They expect coldness, but find warmth. They expect distance, but find understanding. They expect hardness, but find depth. Because you're not closed off, you're simply selective. You're not antisocial, you're intentional. You're not friendless, you're filtering for the rare few who feel like home. And psychology says people like you often build the most meaningful connections later in life, because by then, you know exactly who you are, what you value, and what kind of energy you allow into your world. So if your circle is small, if your phone is quiet, if your life feels more peaceful than social, it's not a weakness, it's a sign of emotional evolution. The truth is simple. Some of the most grounded, self-aware, emotionally intelligent people walk alone until they find someone worth walking with. And there's another layer people rarely talk about. Those who spend a lot of time alone often develop something most social butterflies never get the chance to build, a sharpened inner world. When you're not constantly distracted by noise, obligations, or shallow interactions, your mind turns inward, and it grows. Psychology calls this internal richness, a mental landscape filled with thoughts, ideas, and reflections most people never slow down enough to explore. You don't just think, you analyze. You don't just feel, you understand the meaning behind the feeling. This is why people who walk alone often seem older mentally, even if they're the youngest in the room. Your brain was forced to understand things early. It studied people from a distance. It watched how they acted, how they lied, how they shifted their tone, how they revealed themselves without noticing. You didn't grow bitter, you grew aware. And that awareness comes with a cost. Because once you start seeing people clearly, you can't unsee them. You start picking up on the smallest things, the slight change of tone when someone wants something from you, the forced smile that hides envy, the performative kindness that feels mechanical, the way some people only listen so they can talk next. For most people, these details slip by unnoticed, but not for someone like you. Your mind grabs onto subtleties the way others grab onto headlines. And once you learn the patterns, you start moving differently. You pull back, you observe more, you give less of yourself away. Not because you're cold, but because your attention is too valuable to waste. Another thing people misunderstand, you don't dislike connection. You dislike cheap connection. You crave the type of conversation where someone's eyes soften, their voice slows down, and their real self appears without fear. Where the energy in the room feels honest, not rehearsed. Where both people leave feeling lighter, not drained. You're not running away from relationships. You're running away from repetition. From the same predictable conversations, from the same predictable behaviors, from the same predictable endings. Psychology calls this connection selectivity, and it's more common in people with introspective personalities and emotional intelligence. And there's something else, something almost no one realizes. People like you carry silent emotional endurance. You've handled most things alone. Your breakdowns had no audience. Your victories had no applause. Your thoughts had no place to land but your own mind. This builds a quiet strength most people never have to develop. While others fall apart without constant validation or company, you learn to hold yourself steady through storms no one even knew you were walking through. And maybe the most misunderstood part? You don't feel lonely the same way others do. Your loneliness is different. It's not a desperate ache. It's an awareness. A sense that while you enjoy your own company, you also wonder if there's someone out there who sees the world with the same clarity you do. Someone who listens deeply. Someone whose presence doesn't drain you, but steadies you. Someone real. Until then, you're fine on your own, not because you want to be isolated, but because you refuse to shrink yourself just to fit into spaces that were never built for you. And the truth is, people like you aren't broken. You're not unfinished. You're not behind. You are simply wired to move through the world with more depth, more sensitivity, and more awareness than most people are prepared for. And that is not a weakness. It's a strength disguised as solitude. If anything, it means you're becoming exactly the person you were meant to be. Someone who chooses peace over noise, authenticity over popularity, and truth over comfort. And one day the right people won't be intimidated by your depth. They'll recognize it. Because they'll have it too. But the deeper truth psychology rarely talks about is this. People who walk through life with very few friends often carry an inner world so complex, so layered, that most people never even realize what they're missing. Because while everyone else is busy trying to fit into social groups, you're busy observing them. Quietly, carefully, almost scientifically. And that silent observing shapes you in ways most people will never understand. You notice things early. The shift in someone's tone, the tension behind someone's smile, the way someone's eyes dart when they're hiding something. You read people like body language is your first language, not your second. And because of that, you can't play dumb the way others do. You can't pretend not to notice the fake compliment, the hidden jealousy, the subtle competition woven into a harmless conversation. Your mind doesn't let things slide. It analyzes, stores, and remembers. That makes you seem distant, but the truth is, you're just aware, painfully aware, of what most people try to ignore. And there's another layer to it. When you grow up learning to depend on yourself, the idea of depending on others feels unnatural. You learned early that the safest place is inside your own mind. Your thoughts became your comfort, your curiosity became your companion, your independence became your identity. So while other people chase constant social stimulation just to feel alive, you've learned to feel alive even in silence. Especially in silence. People don't realize how much self-awareness isolates you. When you understand yourself deeply, you automatically start understanding people deeply. And once you do that, you can't unsee certain things. The insecurity behind someone's bragging, the loneliness behind someone's sarcasm, the fear behind someone's anger. You begin to see the emotional code behind human behavior. And suddenly, socializing isn't just talking, it's processing, evaluating, decoding, filtering. No wonder it exhausts you. But this doesn't mean you're cold or detached. In fact, people like you often feel emotions more intensely than anyone else. You're not numb, you're selectively open. You don't attach easily, but when you do, you attach deeply, loyally, wholeheartedly. You don't care about having many connections. You care about having real ones, rare ones. The kind of relationships built on honesty, not performance, on depth, not convenience. And psychology has a name for this too, high relational intelligence. It means you form bonds with intention, not with impulse. It means you choose your people instead of collecting them. It means your friendships might be few, but they are meaningful. And that scares some people because your presence makes them confront the truth about their own shallow connections. Here's something nobody admits. The world is loud, but you've learned to stay quiet. Not because you're shy and not because you're lost, but because you know that silence reveals people. When you speak little, you hear everything. When you step back, you see the whole picture. And when you stop trying to fit in, you finally understand where you actually belong. Psychology says people who spend long stretches of life alone are often the ones building something inside. Resilience, creativity, emotional depth, a stronger identity. While the world thinks you're disconnected, you're actually becoming more connected to the only thing most people never truly meet, yourself. And once you build that inner foundation, you stop chasing acceptance. You stop chasing validation. You stop chasing people who were never meant to stay. Because you realize something powerful. Solitude isn't a punishment, it's preparation. It's the space where your mind sharpens, your intuition strengthens, and your standards rise. It's where you learn who you are and who you refuse to be. And people feel that on you. They feel the steadiness, the self-trust, the quiet confidence. They feel that you don't need anything from them, and that changes everything. Most people fear being alone because they've never sat with themselves long enough to understand who they are. But you've done the work, willingly or not. And that's why your presence has weight. That's why you don't cling. That's why you don't chase. And that's why the few people you eventually let in will experience a version of connection deeper than anything superficial circles could ever create. Because in a world full of noise, distraction, and performance, your mind operates on depth, on honesty, on truth. And that kind of mind walks a different path, a quieter one, a slower one, but ultimately a richer one. If anything, your lack of friends doesn't reveal your weakness. It reveals your evolution, the unspoken kind, the kind that grows in silence, the kind that most people never reach because they're too busy trying not to be alone. You've simply learned what many people never do. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the beginning of it. But there's another layer psychology rarely talks about: the silent habits you develop when you've spent most of your life relying on yourself. You start noticing things most people overlook. Micro-expressions, shifts in tone. The difference between someone asking a question because they care and someone asking because they're fishing for information. Your brain becomes a quiet observer of human behavior, almost like it's running in analyst mode by default. While others rush into conversations, you watch first. You listen. You read the room before you ever enter it. People mistake this for shyness or coldness or distance, but it's none of those things. It's awareness, a kind of inner radar that never really turns off. And this awareness shapes you in subtle ways. You become the type of person who thinks before speaking, the type who chooses words carefully because you know how powerful words can be. You've felt the sting of careless comments before. You've experienced the confusion of mixed signals, broken promises, and empty friendships. So now you communicate with intention, not loudly, not forcefully, just truthfully. There's also a quiet strength in the way you carry yourself. People might not notice it, but they feel it. They feel it in the way you don't cling, don't chase, don't beg for attention. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need to be in every group chat or invited to every gathering to feel whole. You've learned to stand on your own 2 feet, and that independence radiates from you even when you're silent. But the irony is this: people like you, the ones who prefer solitude, the ones who think deeply, observe quietly, and trust slowly, often end up forming the strongest bonds when they finally meet their people. Because when someone earns your trust, they don't just get a friend. They get loyalty. They get honesty. They get the version of you that most people never even glimpse. Psychology calls this selective social engagement, the ability to build exceptionally deep connections, but only with a very small circle. And that circle, once formed, becomes unbreakable. Still, the world doesn't always understand souls like yours. They expect constant conversation, constant socializing, constant noise. They measure connection by quantity instead of depth. But you've always seen the world differently. You've always known that silence can be comforting, that solitude can be healing, and that loneliness doesn't always mean being alone, Sometimes it's being surrounded by the wrong people. Growing up this way teaches you something important. Your inner world matters just as much as the outer one, and that inner world becomes your anchor, your sanctuary, the place you return to when everything else feels too loud, too fake, too overwhelming. It's where you process, recharge, and rebuild. And the truth is, people with minds like yours are often the ones who end up understanding others the most, because you've spent years studying people without even realizing it. You've learned how fear shapes behavior, how trauma hides behind jokes, how insecurity disguises itself as arrogance. You see what others miss because you've lived inside your own thoughts long enough to recognize patterns instantly. This is why people sometimes open up to you unexpectedly. They feel safe around you without knowing why. They feel understood, sometimes more than they've ever felt with their closest friends. Because you don't judge, you don't rush, you don't interrupt, you listen, truly listen, and that alone is rare. And here's something else psychology says. Individuals who spend long periods alone develop a stronger sense of identity. They know who they are without needing the world to tell them. They know their preferences, their values, their boundaries, their emotional triggers. They don't mold themselves to fit in because they've already learned how to exist without that validation. That's why you outgrow people quickly. Why you can feel someone's intentions within minutes. Why some conversations feel heavy while others feel effortless. You've trained yourself, quietly, unintentionally, to recognize what aligns with your peace and what threatens it. So if your path has been quieter than others, if your life hasn't been filled with big friend groups, constant socializing, or endless noise, understand this. There is nothing wrong with you. In fact, there might be something profoundly right. Your mind simply works in a way the world doesn't always celebrate. Thoughtful, observant, self-aware, deeply intuitive. A type of psychology that isn't loud, but speaks volumes. A type of strength that isn't aggressive, but unshakable. And sometimes the people who walk alone for a long time end up walking farther than anyone expected. Because solitude didn't break you. It shaped you. It sharpened you. It turned you into someone who doesn't just survive the world, you understand it. And understanding, in the end, is one of the rarest forms of intelligence.